Hey, what's going on, guys? My name's Griffin, and I'm a filmmaker based out of Orange County, California. And today we're going to be talking about the Canon C70 with the Canon 0.71 speed booster. So prior to Canon announcing the C70, I never really had too much of an interest in speed boosters because none of the cameras that I shot with were supporting them. But when Canon announced the C70 and the Canon branded speed booster, I wanted to kind of take a deep dive and just sort of understand how speed boosters work in the real world and how that affects the image, especially when it's compared to a full frame camera like the Canon C500 Mark II. So in this little test shot that I set up, I really tested three things. The first thing was the Canon C70 with the speed booster. The second thing was the Canon C70 just with the basic Canon adapter for EF glass. And then the third thing was the C500 Mark II in full frame mode. So what I did is I just matched the settings across the board, same white balance, same ISO, same f-stop, everything was matched perfectly, and I used the exact same lens on the exact same tripod in the exact same place. So there might be a tiny bit of variance just because the C70 is a tiny bit shorter than the C500 Mark II in the exact framing, but it's going to be really close, and I think it's going to really help us understand exactly what the speed booster is doing to the image. So if you guys have seen my other videos, you guys probably already know Delaney by now, but I always want to thank her for putting up with me for doing all these camera tests. But hopping right into it, this is ISO 1600 f1.4 with the C70 with the speed booster here. And now here's the C70 just with the stock Canon adapter in Super 35 mode. And now here's the C500 Mark II. So first thing I'm noticing is the C70 comes in just a touch more magenta than the C500 Mark II. And when I use the speed booster, it also comes in just about a third of a stop lower in exposure than the C500 Mark II does. This could easily be corrected, so I just made a simple white balance adjustment, -1 on the green, and I just bumped it 0.2 on the exposure, and now they look really close. I am noticing a little bit of difference in the skin tones too. It seems like the C500 Mark II handles the highlights in our skin tones just a little bit different than the C70 does, and I kind of prefer the way the C500 does it. Okay, so hopping over to the second test, I just shot the same exact scene, but I wanted to change up the settings because I wanted to see if there was anything going on with the depth of field, because on the first test I thought I noticed the depth of field looking a little bit different. So I stopped the lens down to f2.8 and bumped the ISO up to 6400. So this should theoretically be the same exact exposure as the test before, but the depth of field should be a little bit deeper here. First up is the C70 with the speed booster, and the C70 with the basic Canon adapter. And now here's the C500 Mark II. So on this test, I thought it was pretty apparent how different the depth of field was when using the speed booster, even when you match the same settings. So the exposures will match, but what I thought was pretty interesting was you actually see the background, the depth of field look quite a bit different. It looks like it's probably about one stop difference to me. So on the C500 Mark II, you can see how blurry the tree is there, and you can see the separation. And now here's the C70 with the speed booster. You can see quite a bit more that's actually in focus. So I'm not like a scientist or anything, and I'm not trying to figure out exactly why it does what it does, but I think in a practical sense, if you just want to get the two cameras to look the same, I think what you need to do on the C70 with the speed booster is open up your lens one more stop. So in this particular case, I was shooting 2.8 on the C500 Mark II. If I wanted it to look the same on the C70, I could bump down the ISO to 3200 and open up the lens to 2.0. And then you can see that. To me, that looks a whole lot closer. So I don't know, I guess I just didn't really understand exactly how speed boosters work. I'm not sure if this is unique just to the Canon one, but I did want to share my experience because I thought that was kind of unique and interesting. One other thing that I thought was kind of interesting is when you use the C70 just with the basic Canon adapter, it actually has a blurrier background. So when you use the speed booster, it gives you a wider field of view, but it actually increases the depth of field, meaning more is going to be in focus. And this actually came as a surprise to me. So one of the cool things with the Canon speed booster, or I guess any speed booster in general, is it is going to allow your lens to both capture more light and shoot at a shallower depth of field. So in particular, this 50mm 1.2 that I was using for the test, it usually opens up to a 1.2. That's as wide as it goes on a C500 or an R5 or a 1DX Mark III or something like that. Now, when you put it on the C70, it'll actually open up to a 0.9. Yeah, 0.9, that's crazy. And that's pretty cool because it allows you to drop the ISO So whereas if you were shooting at 0.9 on the C70, you would be shooting at 1.2 on the C500 Mark II. So it allows you to shoot at a full stop lower on the ISO. So that's kind of nice if you're shooting in a low light circumstance, or if you just want to really get a shot of the depth of field. In terms of physical attributes of the speed booster, I would say there's hardly any play whatsoever. And if you're concerned about that, there's actually 4 mounting screws that you can put in that'll actually give it even more support. So if you're using a bigger lens or you're using focus motors, there won't be any play at all. It does have a little bit of weight to it. I actually kind of like that because that's one of the things with the C70. It's a really light camera, and I do find that I get a little bit more micro jitters when I'm hand holding it. So having a little bit of extra weight in the mount adapter is something that I kind of like. Some people might not like that though. I think it's a personal preference thing. In terms of autofocus when using the speed booster, I found it to be pretty much exactly the same as when you're using a regular Canon mount adapter. I didn't find there was any performance drop off or anything like that. And when they first announced it, they were saying there was only, I think, 3 lenses that were supported. I think it was the 16 to 35 2.8 version 3, the 24 to 105, and the 24 to 70. So what that means is being supported is it supports the peripheral illumination correction. Wow, that's kind of hard to say. And also the chromatic aberration correction, but it still works with autofocus. So if you're using something like the 51.2 or any other Canon lens, it should work just fine. Now, I haven't tried it with Sigma lenses or Tamron or any of the other brands, but you might want to test that out yourself before you make any commitments there. One other thing that's pretty unique and kind of surprising is the Canon Speed Booster works with the Red Komodo. So I have done a few tests with the Komodo on my channel, and one of the things that I was mentioning that I didn't like about it was the fact that it crops in on the sensor. Well, you can kind of combat that with a Speed Booster. So it'll actually give you like a full frame field of view when you're shooting in 24 frames a second or 40 frames a second. And then when you go to 60 frames, it'll crop into about a Super 35 area. So that's kind of a game changer for that camera in some ways, and I might do a test on the channel. If you guys are interested in that, maybe consider leaving a comment and I'll check that out. And if it seems like there's a lot of interest, then I'll probably do a test. So anyways, guys, that was just kind of a quick one today. I did just want to share my experience testing out the C70 with the speed booster versus like quote unquote proper full frame camera like the C500 Mark II. Just know that the test results should be the same with the R5 or the 1DX Mark III. It's going to look really similar. So let me know, were you guys surprised about anything? I mean, I kind of was. I was surprised about that depth of field thing. Also, just wanted to say a huge thank you to you guys. Seriously, I was blown away to be able to reach 5,000 subscribers this year. I just started YouTube at the beginning of this year, just to kind of share some of my gear insights and tips and tricks from being on set. Hopefully you guys find this channel useful. Let me know in the comments too if you guys are looking for any particular videos. I'd love to make those in the future. And honestly, just from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys for being here. So if you like this kind of content, maybe consider hitting that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.